tutors, mentors, and the city with your host.com.
The City Tutors presents
Tutors, mentors, and the city
with your host.com.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Kevin.com Brown, and welcome to Tutors, Mentors, and the City. I'm gonna say this for full disclosure. I say this in every so often in our interviews. That was not the name I really wanted to go with. For full disclosure, I wanted to go with Tutors, Mentors, and Dragons. Because I believe when you add dragons to anything, you make it way cooler, right? But I couldn't get anybody else to sign off on that title, so we ended up with Tutors, Mentors, and the City. And it's brought to you by City Tutors. Special shout out to the Executive Director, Gary Rifkin, and the Chief Program Success Manager, Michael Chin, and all the beautiful people that work for the organization and all our beautiful volunteers. Now, that being said, allow me the opportunity to introduce our guests for this episode. Please give a nice round of applause to Mr. Alan Hershkowitz. Give it up for Alan Hershkowitz, everybody. Yay! Okay, so Alan, tell us about yourself. What do you do?
Well, first of all, thank you for what you do. Because I know that when I was at City College, and I graduated from City College in 1978, and then I went through the CUNY grad school and got a PhD in actually what was technically called political economics, but today would be called resource economics. But the field of resource economics did not exist back then in the early 1980s. People throughout my college career were enormously helpful in guiding me. You know, the best careers are unplanned. In January of 1974, I thought I was going to be a poet or a journalist or do something with writing. And my profession right now is, and for the last 40 years, I've been an environmental scientist. So, how did that happen? Basically, I just kept following my interests, following my heart, following my soul, asking questions. And I gravitated towards a field that is focused on alleviating human suffering. Back then, when I started doing this work and getting paid for it, which was 1978, was the first time while I was working on my PhD, was the first time I got a fellowship to do environmental research as a summer internship. Totally serendipitous. I was heading on the subway, heading back to Brooklyn, bumped into a professor who wasn't even my professor, but we knew each other from the grad school. His name was Frank Macchiarola, may he rest in peace. And he said, what are you doing this summer? I have a fellowship to do some research. And I said, great. I never got paid for using my mind, only using my body up until that point, driving a taxi, whatever, working in my dad's ice cream store, being a waiter. And then I got an opportunity to do research on New York City's water supply. And that sort of piqued my interest in environmental issues and water and public health issues. And it framed my approach to my PhD dissertation, which I did on New York City energy systems and identifying opportunities to reduce consumer costs and ecological impacts. And I worked with some spectacular mentors. Robert Engler was the sponsor of my dissertation. Marshall Berman was really a professor of political science who, brilliant, Harvard, Columbia, Oxford degrees, taught at City, distinguished professor. He was most responsible for getting me to City, and he was on my dissertation committee. And the faculty at City and at the City University could not have been more helpful and supportive in helping me figure out, what to do. And, I wound up being, an expert in technology, energy technology, and I started to study garbage burning and garbage recycling, and I wrote books on garbage management in Europe and Japan. And I started to work for a little think tank. I did teach at City College. I taught at Queens College. I taught at Baruch College. I taught at Hunter College. I've lectured around the world, but I did have adjunct lectureships at City University schools. And, the diversity of the students was just invigorating and brought so much knowledge and wisdom, frankly, a certain, urban indigenous knowledge and indigenous science. And I learned so much from, going to college and getting a PhD and living in New York City. I mean, it really, from a cultural knowledge, intellectual stimulation perspective, it doesn't get much better than that. I love the fact that I'm able to mentor students now. I not only mentor students through your program, which I love, but given the fact that I'm the environmental science advisor to the NBA and to the New York Yankees and to Major League Soccer, there's a lot of folks who are interested in sport management. They're interested in sustainability. So, I helped create the Green Sports Alliance, and I helped create Sport and Sustainability International. And, I work with the United Nations Sport for Climate Action Framework, which is using sport as a platform to promote climate literacy and environmental literacy more broadly. Less than 20% of Americans follow science regularly, and over 80% follow sports regularly. So if you want to educate people and change their behavior, you got to connect with them somewhere. Where are they? And, as a scientist, an environmental scientist, I know that the vast majority of ecological and cultural impacts are upstream. 95% of a product's impacts happen before you open the package. So the supply chain of sports involves every industry: chemicals, water, food, textiles, transportation, plastics, paper. So if you want to change the production system using the platform of sports, the way they buy goods and services, the messages they send to the marketplace can be meaningful. And right now we're in a, urgent ecological crisis. There's no end in sight to the climate crisis right now. And, we have to basically change get out of fossil fuels, change the way we produce goods and services. And, and coming out of, City College, it's particularly meaningful to me that, the most disproportionately impacted subgroup populations when it comes to environmental justice and climate justice are communities of color, low income communities, women and girls. And, that demographic was, what my City University education, imbued in me. Plus I was, born and raised in Brooklyn. I was born in Crown Heights, and I was raised in East Flatbush on the border of Bed-Stuy and Canarsie. It was an interesting mix of blacks and Latinos and Italians and Jews. It was not a melting pot. It was more like a stew, because every component kept its identity, but we were all in the same pot, So we brought these different cultural wisdoms to our playground and our experiences. As I said, there's nothing more meaningful than trying to alleviate human suffering. And right now we need, as many humanitarians as possible, working on the ground, and I often get asked, about helping people get into the field of sustainability. And what I'd like to remind everybody is that sustainability is more than just climate action. There are 17 United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And if you're not familiar with the Sustainable Development Goals, if you interact with me on any mentor conversation, that's one of the first things I pull out, because Sustainable Development Goal number 1 is alleviating poverty, and number 2 is alleviating hunger, and number 3 is promoting good health, and number 5 is gender equality, and of course racial equality, and all types of inequalities. Eliminating all types of inequalities is fundamental to sustainability. and, decent work, and promoting, education among women and girls, and, reproductive rights. All of these, are part of the sustainability development goals as outlined by the UN. So there's a lot of work that needs to happen in many, many areas, not only climate action, but actually we can't solve climate unless we deal with gender issues. 60% of the food grown in the world is grown by women. And they don't get the economic and technical or political resources that, big agribusiness male farmers get. So, there's a lot of work to be done. And, what I have found is having a purpose-driven work. Work is about money and meaning. And it's a lot easier to make money than it is to find meaningful work. And my conversations as a mentor, focuses on how to help people find meaningful work. Everybody getting out of, City University. I mean, there's a lot of jobs. People are going to have a job. You're going to have a job. If you're talking to me and you're looking for a mentorship, there's a reason you're doing that. And that's because you've got a certain energy and ambition. You're going to have a job. That's going to happen. So, okay, your bills will be paid, and that's good. And that's not unimportant. Money matters a lot. But at the end of the day, what psychic income, what meaningfulness are you getting from your work? We want to be happy people. We want to have meaningful lives, understanding our fundamental interdependence. That's really, really critical. I remember when I was at City College, I read Studs Terkel's book, Working. And when I was at City College, the Vietnam War was happening, and there was a lot of conflict between, those of us who opposed the war and construction workers. There was they called them hard hats, and they were sort of cliche, pro-war. And, I remember reading Studs Terkel's book, Working, which enlightened me to the fact that the buildings at City College, the buildings that I was learning in, the buildings that I was sort of developing these anti-war, insights, were built by construction workers, and I was dependent on their activities, and their activities. They wouldn't have their activities if it wasn't for students like me. So we were, interconnected in ways that we just didn't acknowledge. And that's, we all need to understand our interdependence. Race is a fiction. Biologically, our genes are 99.99999% identical. The 6 nines. Race is just a cultural construct that, has distorted our understanding of the fact that we are all one. We have to help each other. And actually, there's opportunities for good jobs helping to alleviate suffering, and City College, City University, my parents are refugees, and, they had their children, some of their, they had 3 children between them were murdered because of, anti-Semitism and Nazism. And, I was raised with an open heart towards, those who suffer, and immigrants and refugees. And, God knows there's, a tremendous amount of work that needs to be done, for us to all, help each other. City College was free when I went. There was no tuition. I came from a low economic, lower middle class family. We didn't have much money, and being able to go to City College, which had some of the best professors in the world, and the only fee I had to pay a $77 student union fee, every term. That was it.
Wow.
So I could buy books. When I had a little bit of money, I bought books, and then if I had a little bit more money, I bought food. you know, uh, that's, yeah, I fell in love with City College. I fell in love with French. I fell in love with Latin. I fell in love with, political theory. I fell in love with, biology and literature. And, I remember my first meeting with my guidance counselor at City, and, he referenced Thoreau, when it comes time to die, let's be able to say we've actually lived. And that was like, whoa, that woke me up, Yeah. So, that's the beauty about City College. If you go to City College, your tuition is subsidized by the government, by the taxpayers, by the community. In my case, it was free. So, that imposes obligations, on us to give back, to give back. And the good news is that giving back is incredibly rewarding personally. And as I said, there are, so many jobs that, pay more than livable wages, decent wages, doing poverty alleviation and hunger alleviation and, and reproductive rights and good healthcare work and, community organizing. I mean, God knows.
You know what? Well, the only first response I have is, wow. Okay. Wow. You sound like a man who has a life well lived. But I have to say this. You just gave a master class in how to be in an interview, because I asked one question and you told me everything else that I don't even have to ask about now. That was absolutely incredible. If I wasn't behind my tripod and would knock over my camera, I would stand up right now and give you a standing ovation for that response you just gave. That was incredible. That was awesome, and I appreciate it. So now I'm gonna dig in. You gave us so much. I'm gonna start unpacking some of this stuff, right? So first of all, I wanna give a special shout out to your backdrop. Your backdrop is beautiful. That landscape of the trees over your shoulder. I think that's your right shoulder. It's so beautiful. It looks like a fake backdrop. It looks like.
Yeah, well, it's real. It's real. Yeah. That's one of the beautiful things about where we live. At least, I'm born and raised in New York, and I've spent my whole life here. And I am literally only, 50 miles north of the city right now. I'm in exile from New York right now. But yeah, I'm looking out. This is, and this time of year, the fall is gorgeous up here. So, we are dependent on nature, of course, without nature, without the raw materials of nature, without chemically stable atmosphere, without clean water, without clean air, you can't do business. You can't have any culture. Nature inspires us,
Absolutely. So, digging back to so many things ran through my mind as you were speaking. So I'm just going to tap into a few of them. So you mentioned you were in college in the 70s, and you mentioned the Vietnam War. Now, I remember the gas crisis, right? The long lines at the gas station. I was a kid. I was too young to have political references or whatever. But how within your field of natural, what was your title? What'd you say your title was?
Environmental sciences.
Environmental sciences.
Yeah.
What's your take on that whole gas crisis thing, right? That using America using that sort of energy, and now we're deprived of it, and these long gas lines. And can your science, can your field of science, environmental science, can it counteract that sort of situation from repeating itself?
Well, yeah, we need to get off of fossil fuels, and that's a big part of my work.
Okay.
Fossil fuels, the acquisition of fossil fuels, has resulted in the overthrowing of governments around the world to make sure we have supplies of oil and gas.
Sorry to interrupt. So when you say fossil fuels, you're talking about oil and gas?
Correct. I'm talking about petroleum and gas and coal.
Okay.
Yeah, which are the principal contributors to global warming, global climate disruption. Thousands of oil spills occur on the ocean every year that are not as publicly reported as some of the bigger ones. Communities of color, low-income communities, indigenous communities are displaced, and their health is, they get, all kinds of, cancer and respiratory diseases and other kind of illnesses. Water systems are polluted. So, fossil fuels, our dependence on fossil fuels, and of course, as you're pointing out, the cost to the consumer and the logistics of delivering it and people dependent on it, cars. We really need to get off of fossil fuels, and we can. And as you probably know, as you've read, General Motors and Ford and Toyota and all the big auto companies are shifting to electric. So if we can get our electricity from non-fossil fuel sources like wind and solar or hydro, then we could charge our cars without using fossil fuels. So we can eliminate the need for those gas lines and the pollution that fossil fuel causes. It's a big project. It's a big undertaking, but connecting it to what I was saying before about doing meaningful work, the climate crisis is causing hundreds of thousands of deaths every year. People are losing their homes to storms, monster storms, storm surges, droughts, hurricanes, fires, wildfires. The air quality in Seattle yesterday because of wildfires, just yesterday, and I'm talking to you on October 21st, 2022, the air quality in Seattle yesterday was worse than Beijing or Delhi. Because of wildfires that are made worse, that are being caused by and made worse because of the climate problem. So, again, working on sustainability, ecological issues, helping to get us, being an inventor, helping to identify opportunities for better technologies that are not based on fossil fuels. 99% of all the plastics that we use come from fossil fuels. So bio-based fuels, bio-based plastics, that is an emerging field of science and engineering, and City College and the City University in general have spectacular scientific and medical programs. And of course, all good schools do. I know that this mentor program is now bigger than just the City University, but I have, a particular love for the City University. Being a product from, I went from kindergarten to PhD in New York City public schools. So, I'm second to none in, loving New York City and loving its educational system and the humanitarian commitment to providing an education to poor children of refugees, of which I, was one. Now I'm just a child of refugees, but I'm less poor. Environmental science, sustainability, ecological economics, every field, whether you're a poet, a construction worker, a scientist, a mathematician, a linguist, every field can help alleviate suffering in one way or another. God knows we need translators, people who speak Arabic, people who speak Spanish, people who speak different languages are critical, to help, folks culturally integrate. My first language was not English. I know the challenges my parents faced in learning English. And the challenges I faced very early on too, which kind of freaked me out, which is one of the reasons I think I gravitated towards literature and also to math and science, because 2 + 2 is 4 in any language, except maybe in some crazy political world that we're all familiar with that I don't need to get into here. Yeah. So, promoting decent work, again, purpose-driven work, people, should realize that, again, work is about money and meaning, and there's a lot of financial opportunity to do meaningful work.
Absolutely. So you said English was not just your first language, but you didn't say what the language was. What?
Yiddish.
Oh, okay. Okay. So how long did it take you to switch over and learn English?
Well, I learned pretty quick because until I was 5 years old, I was just interacting with my parents in Yiddish. Although my sister is 5 years older than me, I did know some English, not much though. But then they instead of putting me into a religious school, they put me into public school so I would learn English. So I kind of had a crash course from kindergarten on, which totally stressed me out. I'm still recovering from that trauma.
Okay. And what high school did you go to?
I went to Tilden. I went to Samuel J. Tilden High School. Some notable, Al Sharpton was there when I was there. Willie Randolph from the New York Yankees was there. So there's some really great folks who graduated from Tilden. Unfortunately, Tilden was closed because of crime. Maybe within the last 10 years, the city closed it. So I'm sad about that. But it was wild, but it was great, and I learned what I needed to learn, and I got into City College. I graduated Tilden class mathematician for what it's worth. Made some friends that I still keep in touch with. Okay.
And so you were obviously a whiz in high school.
I was not really a whiz in high school. Well, I was, I did okay.
Okay. Were you a whiz in college?
I did very well in college, and because I loved, I took courses that I was really excited about learning. It was like, I took a course in yoga in college. I took French. I took Latin. I took international politics. I took political theory. I took chemistry. Because, frankly, the fact that it was not. I did not go there as a vocational school. I did not go there to get training to get a job. I went there to learn who I was. And I remember when I was graduating college, I went to my English professor, who was one of my mentors, Professor Samuel Mintz. May he rest in peace, but he was spectacular. And I went to him, and I was graduating cum laude. I did very well in college. And I said, Professor Mintz, I'm graduating, cum laude, and I feel like I know less now than when I came to college. And he said, Mr. Hershkowitz, who smoked a pipe, Mr. Hershkowitz. And in those days, you could smoke a pipe in the building. And he was. And he said, the reason they call graduation commencement is because here you learn the questions to ask. And now you must go out and commence your education in finding answers. And, I said, okay, great. I'll go to grad school, and that's what I did. And, I learned so much at City College. I learned Thoreau, I learned André Gide, I learned French, I learned Latin, I learned biology, I learned chemistry, I learned, Marx, I learned Thoreau, Thomas Mann, Marshall Berman, incredible. And communist political systems and European parliamentary systems and, American, Puritan philosophy and, the Federalist Papers and, what it meant to be, the Constitution, and I remember how much work I put in learning about our civic government and the foundations for it and the philosophy behind it. And, it's so clear to me when people don't read today, when people are not reading, democracy requires a commitment to knowledge, a commitment to learning. It's premised on an informed citizenry. And, just speaking for myself, boy, it took me a long time to really understand, how beautiful and humanitarian our political system, the ideas behind it, of course it was not applied, to blacks or to women or, it was, and racism. I studied with, Cornel West, he was one of my teachers, Elie Wiesel, I studied with him for a year at City College, before he won the Nobel Peace Prize, I had an incredible humanitarian education from some of the greatest, political, humanitarian thinkers, that ever lived. Remember when I went to college, CCNY, City College was among the highest paying universities for faculty in the country. So it attracted, a very, we could compete, on salaries with some, and I believe that City University has produced more Nobel laureates than any other college in the world. And there were a number of Nobel laureates that were teaching when I was a student there. It's been a spectacular, the good fortune of being born and raised in New York City never escapes me. The fact that my parents emigrated to New York, they could have emigrated somewhere else, it's just so much of life is just serendipitous chance. If I didn't bump into that professor in the subway car on my way home from grad school, I wouldn't have gotten that fellowship. I may have never gotten into environmental science. And by the way, at that fellowship, I met the woman who became my wife. And we had 3 children together, and they're now all grown humanitarians doing their work. And, that just was because I walked into one subway car where that professor was. And if I had walked into a different subway car, I wouldn't have met him and he wouldn't have said, I have some research fellowship for you. So, life is, read the I Ching, the forward of the I Ching by Carl Jung. It's very, very meaningful. Yeah. People need to read more. That's for sure.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you for those responses. This is one of those interviews that I'm going to have to go back and I'm going to have to rewatch it several times. You've dropped so many jewels that I'm like, oh, I need that one. I need that one. Right. And you are answering questions that, not interview questions. You're answering questions that have been conflicting me in my mind, because I'm in grad school now. I'm going for my master's degree at City College, and it wasn't planned. I dropped out undergrad in 1988, and my mother made me promise that I'd go back one day. Okay, so yeah, whatever. Never thinking, never expecting to go back. She sadly passed away last year, but I realized I had not honored my promise to her, so I went back. And to honor that commitment, all I needed was my bachelor's degree, and that was a done deal. Okay, Mom, I did it. But my advisor, who I never met in person, on Zoom, she directed me to the major of Black Studies.
Oh, great.
And I fell in love. Right. I fell in love with learning about the history of my people and the more accurate history and how to actually research it. So I understand what you mean when you say it just so happened. Right. Because I told that advisor at City College that I want to be a theater major because my career was an actor. And she said, no, you don't want to take theater. You could teach those classes. You should consider Black Studies. And I was like, well, I'm not really woke like that. And I'm not really, but if it'll help me get my degree. So it was just like your situation. So now I'm conflicted because And I said this to my professor in grad school. I said, my struggle with grad school is I'm used to knowing stuff. Like I was the smartest kid in my elementary school. I was one of the top smartest kids in my junior high school. I'm used to walking in knowing stuff, but the point of college or education is you're not supposed to know it when you walk in, but you should know it when you walk out, right?
Well, you should know, what I encourage people is to try to get one new insight or fact per class. So if you taking 4 classes a term, 2 terms a year, that's 8 classes. So I encourage people to try to come out with one new insight per class. That would be 8 per year. And if you're 4 years, that's, 32 new insights over the course of that's huge. That's a lot of insight, So I would say, take it slow. The issues you're working on are not resolvable. Racism is not a resolvable issue. Misogyny, women hatred is not a resolvable issue. The climate crisis is not a resolvable issue. These are challenges that humanity has had to deal with forever. Okay. And it's our role to try to move the ball forward. We have to there's more slaves today than there were 100 years ago. Okay, we have to fight slavery. We have to fight racism. We have to fight misogyny. We have to fight for a healthy planet. But we're not going to achieve those goals in our lifetime. So we have to mentor. This brings us back to what you're doing. Mentoring the next generation of humanitarians to figure out how to be a sustainable humanitarian. We need a personal ecology. We talk about global sustainability. Well, we need a personal sustainability, because if you're going to try to, educate people about Black studies, and let me tell you, that's one of the most important fields that you could be involved in right now. There are literally efforts, political, legislative, there are people in political positions who are trying to deny Black people or white people, all people, the knowledge that Black studies can imbue in all of us, and that the ultimate goal of Black studies is to promote humanitarian understanding and respect for each other and appreciation for diversity. Okay. So, and there are folks who are trying to make that education illegal. Okay, I'm sorry to say it that way, but that they're taking books out of libraries that teach that work. So, let me tell you, you talk about the 70s when I was in college, it was just the opposite. Black studies programs were being invented, and there was a proliferation and a recognition of, the contributions that Blacks made in art, and there was an opening up of, really a truth telling. And that's the first courtesy that we owe each other. Telling the truth. That's the first courtesy that we owe each other. Tell the truth. And so, you're doing, so, bravo to you. And you know what? Where Black studies will take you, who knows? You're on a journey, man, and the beautiful thing is, being motivated by your mom. I'm motivated by my mom too, my folks, and you think of your ancestors, my God, what the people who came before us went through. Okay. My father came through Auschwitz concentration camp. My mother was part of the Dachau medical experiments. Okay. Think of your ancestry, what the people who came before you had to put up with, so that you are right now running a phenomenal mentoring program, helping to empower people, getting a master's degree in Black studies. You're going to be an even more influential educator. Their struggle is validated by your accomplishments. They persevered so that you would be able to have the life you are leading right now, and you are honoring them by your accomplishments. And, and guess what? You yourself will be an ancestor one day. people will look back at you and they'll say, yeah, Kevin, yeah, my grandpa Brown, my grandpa Kevin, he took the ancestors before him and their perseverance, and he took it to a new level of accomplishment. And I'm going to follow in his footsteps and be inspired by his, good work. Yeah, man, we're all part. It's a flow. We're part of a long flow, and I know that, the original humans came out of Africa. We are all the same, man. And that's the message. We have to teach each other to love each other and to help each other. And the good news is the more we do that, the better we feel. So it's a win-win.
Alan, you killing me, man. You got me breaking down, crying. I never do this. I never cry. I don't cry for anything. Your word.
How could you not cry? I mean, come on. How could you be in this world and not cry?
Well, let's put it this way. I never cried on camera before. I've been on camera a lot. Your words sound like your words are filling my heart. Your words are filling my soul. Like, I can't even believe that I was fortunate enough to get a chance to interview you like this. Okay, Google, stop. I set alarms because I have another interview right after you.
Yeah.
But Alan, you making me cry on camera. I can't believe. Alan, I can't believe it. So I dropped my phone. I got tears coming out my eyes. I dropped my phone. The words that you shared were the words I've been looking for, and I didn't even know it.
Yeah, beautiful.
And I can't even believe the impact your words just gave me. Like, I don't even know what to say, man.
Well, look,
I always know what to say.
You're doing beautiful stuff. Just keep doing what you're doing. Trust yourself. Just trust yourself. We all have doubt. That's part of the process. If you're a visionary, that by definition puts you ahead of the pack. So, it ain't easy. If you want to alleviate suffering, you're going to suffer. Awareness is the first step towards healing, right? Unless we really understand the reasons we suffer, we can't heal it. And if you really want to authentically understand suffering, I mean, I have been with families that live on garbage dumps in Central America. Okay. I have been with workers in northeastern China that never had a toothbrush. Okay. I have been working in communities in Central America where the children had no shoes. Actually, they had one pair of shoes that they wore on Sunday to church. Okay. But the rest of the week, including playing soccer, they were barefoot. Okay. Half the planet, is living on less than $5 a day. So we're in a very privileged position. But if you understand suffering, it's really sad. And I'm an empath, and I experience a lot of empathic distress. Okay, I cry a lot. I mean, how could you not? I don't. Well, the fact is that if you're going to be authentic. Okay, your ancestors, you weren't born here to just buy and sell things. There was a meaning to your, the reason your consciousness got expressed as a human. The Hindus have this idea that the soul has to be born 84,000 times before it becomes a human on earth to do its work. So if our soul had to be born 84,000 times in one form or another before we became humans, let's use that history of 84,000 births. And it took us a long time to get here. So let's use it for for something that helps others, So yeah, look, good luck with all your work. Good luck with your interviews. Thanks for interviewing me. If I could be of helpful to you and your organization or your efforts in any way, just please, how to reach me. I know we did this Zoom interview and that's fine, but that does not have to be the totality of our relationship. So, let's connect. sometimes I go to the grad center for some lectures here and there. I'm going to be gone for quite a while. I'm going to India next week for a month. Check out, those cultural challenges, up near Pakistan where the floods occurred, 30 million people lost their homes because of, monster storms made worse by climate. There's a huge humanitarian crisis going on over there right now. And that's part of my world. I see pictures of fathers carrying their children. I'm a father with children, and I could just see myself, being in that situation. They're carrying their children through floodwaters. Their homes are lost. Their fields are gone. Their food supplies, the suffering that's taking place in the world right now. Boy, we need all hands on deck right now, man. We need all hands on deck. And so, persevere. God bless you. Thanks for taking the time to interview me. Is there anything that I need to tell you or you need to ask me before we get off?
I need to tell you something. You are officially my mentor. I mean,
okay,
cool. you gave me more in this conversation than I could have ever imagined. And it's incredible. I'm going to have to go back and play this recording over and over and over.
Well, send me a recording of it. Send me a recording of it so I can see you.
Okay. Okay, I'll do that. I'll definitely make sure that happens. But Alan, thank you so much. It was incredible speaking to you, and thank you.
Right on.
Thank you. All right.